Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and thanks for joining me again. In this week's lesson we're going to tackle one of the really old jazz standards, a tune called After You've Gone. And we're going to learn a pre-war 1930s style chord melody version of it. This is going to be a great workout for your triads and your awareness of chord extensions, as well as moving quickly between shapes. Now you'll have noticed that in the performance at the start of this video, in the bottom half of the screen I included a chord accompaniment. If you're a member of my Patreon, you'll also get a full and thorough video lesson on that chord part. But if you're only really interested in learning the chord melody part, the lead part that was in the top half of the screen, then no worries, I've got you covered, because that's what we're going to go through here today in this YouTube video. So of course you can get the full lesson materials over on my Patreon page, or you can buy this as a one-off lesson at the Gumroad link. And again, just to clarify, the chord accompaniment part of this is available exclusively through my Patreon. So we're playing this tune in the key of B flat, and we start on the 4 chord, E flat, and we play this melody. So we're simply going to harmonize that line of notes along with an E flat major triad, second inversion, string set 2. We're ending up on an E flat major 7 chord here. Now we go to the 4 minor, so E flat minor, and again the melody would be, and again we're going to think triads, E flat minor triad, adapt the top note to include the melody, and now you've got like an E flat minor 6 voicing. Common move on the 4 minor, bringing in the major 7th into the melody, and we can do it that way, the more simple approach, or we can harmonize that major 7th on top of another voicing here, E flat minor 6 with the major 7 on top, playing the top 4 strings, and then back to the E flat minor 6. As a very quick side note, both the minor 6 and the minor major 7th belong to the melodic minor scale, the E flat melodic minor in this case. I do talk about that scale a lot and the chords that we can harmonize from it, but one video in particular where we go into some more depth on that would be my Mark Ribot study, so do check that out. I'll link to it in the description. Right, so far we had the 4 chord, E flat major, and then the 4 minor, E flat minor. Now we go to the 1, B flat. We move that very same idea from the E flat that we had earlier to our tonic chord here, so a B flat major triad, following the melody through until we end up on a B flat major 7th. Now we change the B flat note to a B natural, and we get the top 4 strings of a G7 chord, adding the 9th and going back to the root in the melody. Now we're going to follow through this dominant cycle, so we're moving through a cycle of fourths and going via dominant chords. So G7, we're then going to go to the C7, and what we play here is this voicing on the top 4 strings. One of your fairly standard C7 chord inversions. This would be a first inversion because it has the major 3rd in the bass. Then we're going to chase that melody all the way up here, where again we have a C7 chord basically. Same thing we had for G7 just now, but with the 9 up on top in the melody. And we're playing that note on the 10th fret of the top E string. Now one really important element in making all of this stuff flow and sound smooth is to really experiment with different fingerings and try and find the most efficient way to play everything. In this case I'm trying to keep the same fingers on the top string and the G string. It enables things to sound that little bit smoother, where you hear a bit of a glide into the next chord as opposed to just a cold stop and a restart. And then we go up a 4th again, continuing our dominant cycle to the F7. Same shape again, F7, the same way we played a G7 a moment ago, and that's C7. So this is the top 4 strings of a fairly normal F7 bar chord. And again an F9 for the next chord. This is just the top 4 strings of the classic F9 voicing rooted on the A string. You know, some people call this the James Brown chord. So that was the F7, that's the 5 of our actual home key of B flat. So now we resolve, we take that 5 and resolve to the 1, B flat major. And we're going to play a triad. chase the melody around from the 5 to the 6, and then the major 7 on the top 3 strings, courtesy of what looks to be a D minor triad. And this is another one of the many uses for your triads. We're not always using them at face value. So this is a D minor triad, but it's actually functioning as the top 3 notes of a B flat major 7th chord. Following that melody around on the B string again. And then we play an F minor 11 on the top 4 strings. And then connect this note chromatically along to the major 3rd of B flat. And build the chord around it. So this is a B flat 7, root, flat 7, 3rd and 5th. And the way I'm playing that, picking both of those, but then hybrid picking here to grab the D and B strings while the G string continues to ring, and then filling in that bottom end with the plectrum. Now just to explain what's happening there, our destination at this point is to get back to the E flat chord to start the next section. So we're thinking, how can we get to E flat? We can play its 5. That would be the B flat 7. So that explains that chord. What about the F minor 7? Well, if B flat 7 is 5, F minor 7 is 2. So we're thinking E flat is the destination, and we're just simply 2-5ing that E flat. So we get this 2-5-1 progression happening. 2-5-1. Now we're beginning the next section, same as the previous one to start with. And then things change. Instead of C7 now, we go to a C minor, and the melody is all the way up here, the minor 3rd. So we're going to play this really pretty C minor 7 voicing on the top 4 strings. Frets 10, 12, 11, 11. Now it's important to try and learn to bar those top 2 strings with the 2nd finger and try and bend it in that way. Rather than trying to hook it round this way, bend it in that way so your other fingers can come over and be nice and articulated so as to not block those strings. People try and play it like this, which is fine, but it sort of cuts off a lot of opportunities you might have to do. Some really nice little movements. So there's our C minor 7. Now we're thinking, okay, C minor, and then it's 5 chord, G7, before going back to the C minor again. So we play C minor 7, B diminished 7, which really is G7 flat 9. If you've not seen my video on diminished chords and how they work, then do watch that, because that will make that make a lot more sense. Back to C minor. So we're just inverting the chord we started with. Nice little movement that. If we were in the key of C minor, that's a 1, a 5, and a 1. Find the melody. Then back to that 4 minor we had earlier. E flat minor 6 with the major 7th on top. And then E flat minor 6, 3-note voicing. Chromatically move up to the major 3rd of your B flat 6. So there's the 1 chord. Melody note, D7, melody note, G minor 7 with that same voicing we just spoke about with the C minor 7. A bit more chromaticism here, from the flat 5 to the 5. And then the first time round I played this. C sharp diminished 7th, and the melody moves from the 10th fret to the 8th fret of the B string. Then we go back to the 1 chord, B flat, major triad. This is a really nice 3-note voicing for a B flat 6. Here's the full shape on the top 4 strings, root, 5th, 6th, 3rd. Same thing as a G minor 7 first inversion, by the way. Remove the D string, just to make it a little easier to grab. Now we're thinking 2-5-1 in our home key of B flat, so we need a C minor 7. We're going to play this 3-note voicing here, which is all part of your fairly regular A-shaped C minor 7 chord. Follow the melody up to the sus4 or the 11. And then this F7 voicing on the top 3 strings before moving along to F9, again that same voicing we had earlier, you know, the top of your James Brown chord. So you got C minor 7, F7, F9, and then one of my favourite dominant chord voicings, F7, flat 9 with a 13. So you call this F13 flat 9, and then resolve to B flat major. So that would be 2, 5, 1. Now that would take us to the halfway point of the opening performance, but really all that happens next is I repeat all of that again, but I fill in more rhythmically and strum everything, as opposed to playing things with this sort of loose rubato tempo. So now what we need is a turnaround, some kind of link that takes us back to the start. Again, we're thinking our destination is E flat, because that's the chord we begin with. So we think, what's the 2-5 of that? As we saw earlier, F minor 7 to B flat dominant 7. So let's pick out a couple of fruity voicings to really help ignite that spark and get things kicking along nicely. For the F minor 7, we're going to play this. Now, frets wise, from the D string down, 6, 8, 8, 6. So that first finger is barring. Now, if you were to put the root in there, the F on the 8th fret of the A string, what you've got there is an F minor 9 with the 11 on top. So you could simply call it F minor 11. And as we've done for a lot of this, we're going to dedicate ourselves to the top 4 strings and play this voicing. So F minor 11 we'll call that. And then for the B flat 7, one of my favourite chords, B flat 13 with the flat 9 on top. A moment ago we played F 13 with a flat 9. This time the 13 was on top and the flat 9 was buried beneath it. For this B flat 13 flat 9, they've swapped places. You've got the flat 9 on top and the 13 buried beneath. But they're the same type of chord, and as always you want to know at least 2 positions to play everything. So for example, that F13 flat 9 from earlier, although we played the top 4 strings only, we were visualizing the root as being on the A string. So this would be the full shape. To play it off the low E string, we'd need this shape. Root, flat 7, 3rd, 13, flat 9. Slim it down to the top 4 strings, and you've got this. This type of chord comes from the half-whole diminished scale, by the way. So in this case, the B flat, half, whole, diminished scale. So our little turnaround thing, F minor 11, B flat 13, flat 9, resolving to E flat, where we begin the melody again, but with some rhythmic fill-in. I played a little lick here, a Django-y type of thing. Now I tend to do something different each time on that part, and off the top of my head I can't quite remember what I did on the opening performance, but it would be something along these lines. Where I'm thinking B flat 7, and its extensions like the 9, flat 7, walking chromatically to the major 3rd of the E flat, because that's the melody note that we need to start the next section. Rhythmically you can change that around, of course. A lot of different variations. Play around with all of them. Now back to the usual, but again with that filling in strumming style. Favour downstrokes. And then we go into a half-time feel to give it a bit of heaviness. This time, unlike the first time round where I opted for the C sharp diminished, I've altered the bass note to a C here to make it simply a C13. And we let that hang for a moment just before kicking the tempo back up a notch again. And we close things out with a nice little bluesy phrase. Major 7 to root to finish. Then we strike a B flat 6-9 chord. Root, 6, 9, 5, root. If you wanted to, you could just hit the top 4 strings. And there we have it, a fairly simple but super fun to play pre-war 1930s style chord melody arrangement of After You've Gone. Technique wise, I think it's important to really favour the downstroke. It's a big part of the sound of this era, and try and strike with a bit of force, really don't be shy. It's important to try and project these notes. Remember, this was in the days before amplification and you had to work for your tone. And wherever possible, I'd recommend using some kind of rest stroke technique. So, gear-wise, what am I using? This guitar is likely as close as I'll ever get to owning an original 1920s Gibson L5, which is one of my absolute dream guitars. This is a really good version of that kind of guitar though, and it's very affordable. Made by a company called The Law, L-O-A-R, named after Lloyd Law, the original designer of those Gibson L5s. I bought this guitar about 10 years ago, and it cost me something like £700, which is crazy cheap considering it's all solid wood and a hand-carved top. And it really does have that authentic 1920s archtop type of tone, and I'm really impressed with it. I've played the real thing side by side with it, and it's not too far off at all. I did have a luthier friend of mine do some work on it, the very talented Colin Keefe, who's really well known for building brilliant acoustic guitars. He made a completely new bridge for me, because the original bridge wasn't great, to be honest. He made a beautiful one out of rosewood, and he also made me a pick guard that's sort of period correct, because it didn't come with one. And he basically gave it the full 5-star treatment. He sorted the frets out, sorted the nut out, and this thing sounds really alive. It's got a real energy to it. I'm using 13 gauge strings, so kind of medium gauge, and these are 80/20 bronze from Diodario. And I have the action set just a little higher than I normally would on an acoustic, just so I can dig in a little bit harder and get a bit more of that volume out of it. And I'm using a Blue Chips pick, an STP-60, one of my favourite plectrums. The microphone I recorded with is a really nice recreation of a classic Coles 4038 ribbon mic made by a fella over in Australia called Open Plan Recording. He hand makes really affordable versions of some of the most dreamy vintage mics out there, so do check him out. So for recommended listening in this style, I'd check out players like Eddie Lang, Nick Lucas, Carl Kress, Dick Madunnock and George Van Epps, to name just a few. Okay guys, please do comment down below if you've enjoyed this lesson, and don't forget to like and subscribe, it makes all the difference. Oh, and also check out those links in the description to get hold of the lesson materials. My Patreon is really good value for money. At just $10 a month you get access to all of my lessons, past, present and future. Right, sales pitch over, and I'll see you guys next week. Right, take care.